Arnold Schwarzenegger was invited to speak about patriotism, but the moment he stepped on set, something shifted. They mocked his past, tried to corner him. What they didn't see coming was the silence that made them retreat. And when one MIC hit the floor, it wasn't just a sound. It was a reckoning, live on air. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The lights were already on. The table had been wiped twice. Microphones warmed. The room wasn't expecting debate, it was expecting a formality. A studio assistant whispered ready just as the applause sign dimmed. Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped into frame. No fanfare. Just footsteps and posture. A charcoal suit. No tie. Crisp collar. A silver pin at his lapel, naturalized, 1983, shone briefly under the set lights before he Saturday. Joy Behar didn't wait for him to adjust his chair. Tonight, we are honored to welcome the man who went from flexing on screen to flexing about the Constitution, Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind that lands sideways, rehearsed, knowing. Scattered laughter from the audience. Controlled. Hesitant. Arnold looked at the A-cam. 1 second. Maybe less. Then, a subtle nod. A near smile. He said nothing. Instead, he adjusted the microphone gently, carefully, like he'd done this in another life. Not a beat missed. Sunny Hostin was already flipping through her note cards. Whoopi leaned back, arms folded, eyes steady but disinterested. Arnold kept his gaze level. No pleasantries. No thank you for having me. He wasn't there to play agreeable. Joy uncapped a pen, glanced sideways, then leaned back and wiped her glasses with a folded square of cloth. Told you, she murmured. The MIC picked it up. Not loud, but loud enough. It floated for a moment, then dropped. The studio didn't gasp. That would have been too honest. Instead, a man, late 60s, front row, leaned slightly forward. He glanced around. As if to confirm, did anyone else hear that? As if to say, we're not pretending this is neutral anymore, right? No one looked at him. But the tension shifted by a breath. Sunny cleared her throat. Governor Schwarzenegger, thank you for joining us tonight. We understand you've been vocal lately about what you call the erosion of public trust in media. Can you tell us where that started? Arnold didn't answer immediately. He looked at her. Then at Whoopi. Then back to Sunny. He placed his fingertips together on the table. Not in defense. In architecture. Public trust doesn't start with erosion, he said. It starts with microphones being mistaken for mirrors. A pause. Joy blinked. Sunny tried to move forward. But Arnold wasn't done. If you want to know where it started, it's every time a panel treats discomfort as disinformation. Whoopi leaned forward. You're saying this table is part of the problem. Arnold didn't blink. I'm saying people watching at home know the difference between questioning and performing. Silence. Not awkward. Strategic. Camera 3 caught Joy as she repositioned her glasses again, this time without the cloth. The motion mechanical. Defensive. Arnold didn't fill the silence. He left it there, dense. The moment thinned slightly as Sunny spoke again. So let me clarify, you believe programs like this are contributing to a lack of national cohesion? Arnold reached for his water but didn't drink. I believe that when disagreement is framed as danger, and correction as surrender, the nation gets fragmented by its own echo. Joy raised a brow. That's a bit dramatic for a talk show. Arnold tilted his head, not condescending, just precise. So was January 6th. That didn't start with broken windows. It started with narratives no one dared challenge. The audience shifted. Not applause. Not outrage. Movement. Like a train braking without a whistle. Camera 2 pushed in on Whoopi, who said nothing, just looked sideways. Joy scribbled something down. Underlined it twice. Arnold adjusted the microphone again. Same gesture. Same pace. But now, it didn't look like preparation. It looked like ownership. The air didn't move. For a moment, the set became something else entirely. Not a stage, not a studio, but a courtroom where the lights were the jury and the silence was the only witness that mattered. Arnold hadn't raised his voice. "I respect journalism," he said, slowly. "But I don't respect lies dressed up as reporting, especially when they're written to serve someone's script." His words didn't drop like accusations. They hung, precise, symmetrical, measured not in decibels, but in weight. Camera 2 cut sharply to Sunny Hostin. She was still mid-motion, her right hand holding a pen, her left turning it slowly between two fingers. Then it stopped. Not placed down. Not clenched. Just stopped. Suspended. Like her reflex had been intercepted mid-thought. The camera didn't linger. It cut to Arnold again, just in time for the light to shift. Not a spotlight. Just a subtle lean of brightness across the left side of his face. The other half faded into soft contrast. A split visage, half presence, half restraint. No one at the table moved. Joy looked down. Whoopi blinked. Arnold adjusted nothing. He didn't repeat himself. The power of the moment wasn't in its expansion, it was in what he refused to fill. Someone in the third row coughed, quickly stifled. Then came the first echo. A woman in her late 40s, seated stage right, pressed her palm lightly against her chest. Not dramatic. Not performative. Just contact. Her gaze didn't leave Arnold. If the table noticed her, they didn't show it. Whoopi leaned slightly forward, arms still crossed. "So, you're calling the press liars?" Arnold didn't look at her. "Not yet. I'm saying facts don't become lies just because they're inconvenient. And truth doesn't need a side. Only space." That was the cue. But no one took it. Not Sunny. Not Joy. No interjection. No commercial break. Not yet. The silence had gained mass. This wasn't dead air. It was calculated tension, the kind that makes producers sweat and viewers lean closer. Whoopi tried again. This time, the tone had a slight edge. "You're walking a fine line here. You come on a media platform, say media can't be trusted, and expect no pushback." Arnold looked at her now. Not with defiance. With exactness. "I expect disagreement. I don't expect distortion." Another pause. Disagreement looks like this, face to face. Distortion looks like what happens when a clip is cut down to 11 seconds and given a caption no one actually said. That one hit. Joy set her pen down, slowly. Not to write. Not to engage. Just to remove it from her hand. Arnold didn't follow it up. He let the point breathe. Like a diver, he understood how far silence could carry weight before needing more air. Camera 1 moved in, a push, not a zoom. It framed Arnold with Whoopi slightly blurred in the foreground. She wasn't out of focus, but she wasn't in control either. Then, something unplanned happened. From backstage, the control room dimmed the front fill lights by half a step, intended to soften the visual contrast for the monitors. But the effect was unintendedly poetic. Arnold's half-lit face now glowed, while the desk around him slipped into soft shadow. It wasn't lighting design. It was narrative symmetry. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like an answer. Sunny finally spoke. Her voice didn't project. It folded slightly under the tension. "You talk about distortion, but you've been part of administrations that use terms like fake news to discredit every major outlet. How do you reconcile that?" Arnold turned his chair slightly, not much, just enough to face her more directly. "I don't reconcile slogans. I don't defend branding. I defend substance." He folded his hands. "The problem isn't that people criticize the media. The problem is when the media pretends it's immune to criticism." Another beat. Then, for the first time, he looked down, at nothing in particular. A breath. He wasn't searching. He was pacing the tempo. He looked back at Sunny. "I've been on film sets where directors shouted cut because an actor blinked the wrong way. That's precision. You all sit behind this table, broadcast to millions, and treat misquoting as strategy. That's not journalism. That's performance. No one touched that. Not immediately. The audience didn't clap. Not yet. But there was motion. One man uncrossed his legs. Another shifted forward in his chair. The rhythm of the room had changed, not in applause, but in attention. Joy tried to regain tempo. So what would you have us do? Never question the people in power. Arnold smiled. Barely. I'm not asking for silence. I'm asking for honesty about the volume knob. He tapped the desk. Once. Open palm. Flat. You want to be the microphone. Fine. But don't act like you're not also the amplifier. That landed. Not just with the hosts. With the back row. With the tech crew. With the guy adjusting camera for who forgot to blink. And then came the second silence. This one wasn't resistance. It was recalibration. The audience wasn't shifting away from the hosts. They were shifting toward the space between the sentences. Toward what wasn't being said anymore. And that's when it became clear, this wasn't a guest segment. This was a miscalculated invitation. Arnold sat forward, not aggressive, just anchored. He didn't need applause. He didn't need to win. He had done what only seasoned tacticians of truth understand. He had made the room listen. The microphone caught it. Barely. A breath. Not Arnold's. Not the audience's. It was Whoopi's, shallow, lifted halfway to a rebuttal, then dropped. Not spoken. Not even swallowed. Abandoned. Arnold had leaned forward, an almost imperceptible shift. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't gestured. He simply pressed his fingertips lightly against the base of the mic, anchoring his words to steel. In the past 5 years, he said, calm as if reciting weather data, how many times has this program issued a correction, publicly? Or does that only happen when you think no one's watching? The room froze. Not in shock, but in awareness. There are moments in televised power plays where silence isn't absence. It's containment. A temperature drop so specific it doesn't trigger goosebumps, just clarity. Joy blinked twice. Sunny tilted her head, but said nothing. And Whoopi, who had just drawn air, just prepared to pivot, stopped. She looked left, then straight ahead. No cue came. Camera 3, usually tasked with wide shots, zoomed tighter than usual. It caught it all. Arnold wasn't making a claim. He was making a ledger. And it wasn't what he said. It was how he looked when he said it, like a man reading a number from a watch he didn't buy to impress, but to remember. From the wings, the producer's voice crackled faintly in the host earpieces. A note about segment pacing. But no one moved. No one dared switch topic. They could feel the lens turning. Arnold's fingers lifted from the MSE. Soft, deliberate. This desk, he said, gesturing slightly with his eyes, not his hands, likes to talk about accountability. But I haven't heard one of you say the phrase, "We were wrong," since the pandemic ended. He let that float. Not to accuse, but to offer a space for memory. And that's when it happened. A man in the second row, a congressional aide by his lapel pin, shuffled slightly. A small, barely there movement of adjusting his jacket. But the sound of the fabric, caught by a hanging boom mic, came through like a false start. Like the audience was bracing to move, but didn't. The studio felt it. Not a shift in opinion. A shift in oxygen. Arnold tilted his head, one of those subtle things fighters do in the third round, when they've tasted the tempo and see where it breaks. He didn't smile. He paused. Then added, softer, it's easy to fact-check guests. Harder to fact-check yourselves. That line wasn't applause bait. It was mirror bait. Camera 1 pushed inward, enough to crop the corner of the desk. The composition now framed Arnold against a blur of Joy's notes and Whoopi's folded arms. Symbolic, the words stood clear. The defenses stayed blurred. Whoopi shifted again. A beat too late. We have clarified things, when it mattered. Arnold turned slightly, not toward her, but toward the space between the audience and the table. When did it matter? He didn't ask with venom. He asked like someone waiting for a train that's already late. When it cost someone votes. When it threatened ad revenue. Or only when your own clips made you uncomfortable to watch back. The sound guy coughed. Not because he meant to. Because the line was that tight. Sonny tried to deflect. Classic pivot. This isn't about us. We're not the ones on trial here. Arnold looked at her, steady, not sharp. Exactly. You're the judges, the jury, and the editors of the highlight reel. Another moment passed. Then came the most important beat of the night. Arnold adjusted his chair, just slightly forward. Not a lunge. Not dominance. Just enough to own the frame. Camera 4 cut to a side angle, his shoulder now blocking part of the table. Visually, the power had moved. The desk had become backdrop. You asked me here to talk about public discourse, Arnold said. But what you really wanted was a guest polite enough to take the hits and famous enough to justify the ratings. He let that sit. Then added, I don't do polite for ratings. And I've been hit harder, in darker rooms. The audience didn't cheer. But they sat straighter. They weren't watching an interview anymore. They were watching a correction unfold, not from a Chiron, but from posture. In the back row, a young woman, no older than 30, lowered her phone. She'd been recording. She stopped. Not because it wasn't worth capturing, but because something else was happening. She wasn't an audience member now. She was a witness. Joy tried to reframe. So, Arnold, are you suggesting this show has an agenda? He exhaled. Slow. Thoughtful. No. I'm suggesting it has a mirror. And it hasn't looked into it for a while. Silence. Not cold. Waited. This wasn't rebuttal territory anymore. It was acknowledgement zone. And then, to seal it, Arnold touched the mic again. Just like in Chapter 1. Same gesture. Same fingers. But now, it wasn't a defense. It was punctuation. Arnold didn't raise his hand. He didn't unfold the paper with drama. He simply laid it flat on the desk. Palms down. Edges aligned. Like a man preparing to read a name off a memorial. The lighting didn't change. But somehow, the room felt darker. This, he said, tapping the corner, is a list of headlines. Headlines that were later retracted, rewritten, or quietly deleted, without a single public apology. He didn't look at Joy. He didn't need to. Some came from this network. Others from those who quote it. He didn't read them aloud. The font was visible. The network's watermark unmistakable. The paper said what the silence refused to. Joy leaned forward, not like a co-host, but like someone double-checking a threat. Anyone can print out a Word document, she said, eyebrows raised. That doesn't make you a victim, Governor. There was no pause. No gasp. Just that unmistakable sting of a professional trying to dismiss the evidence by mocking the format. Arnold didn't flinch. You called me dangerous last year, he said, voice level. Because I questioned the optics of televised outrage. He tapped the paper again. Twice. I didn't sue. I didn't write op-eds. I asked for 5 minutes, to speak without being framed first. Camera 1 stayed tight. Tighter than usual. The angle now caught the edge of the document, and Joy's fingers, slowly curling. She was holding back. Or holding on. No reply came. From behind Arnold, a soft cough echoed. Then, movement. Row 3, stage left risers. A woman, mid-70s, steel grey hair in a tight bun, rose slowly. No drama. No shaking hands. Just posture. I don't agree with everything he says, she called out, voice firm but warm, but I thank him for saying it. She didn't sit back down. The audience shifted. Not loudly, visibly. Camera 4, the audience cam, caught the moment. Next to the older woman, a man in his 30s, collar unbuttoned, visitor badge clipped sideways, nodded. Just once. No expression. Just acknowledgement. He wasn't applauding. He was consenting to decency. That's when the ripple began. Joy reached for the paper, but didn't touch it. Her hand hovered, then clenched into a quiet fist over her own stack of cue cards. Sunny. Sunny stopped spinning her pen. Her eyes were no longer on the stage. She looked out, through the camera pit, beyond the lights. Somewhere far from the studio. As if the show had started, and she'd just realized it was about her. Arnold, meanwhile, remained seated. Still. Grounded. That's all I asked, he said softly. Not for agreement. Not for applause. Just space. Whoopi finally stirred. But surely you see how people might take offense. The way you speak, it's very deliberate. Arnold turned toward her. Not aggressive. Not even stern. Just ready. Words should be deliberate, he said. Because once you say them, someone else has to carry them. That line didn't need a reaction. But it got one anyway. A young woman in the front row leaned forward. Her arms were crossed, but not defensively. Her expression had shifted. Less critical. More curious. Like she was finally seeing the fourth wall drop. Joy flipped her cue cards, hard. Too hard. One slipped and hit the desk with a dull slap. The MIC caught it. A thud against paper. Well, if you're done with your manifesto, maybe we can return to the show. Arnold's eyes didn't blink. I didn't write a manifesto. I brought receipts. He gently pushed the paper forward, just an inch. And suddenly, it wasn't a sheet anymore. It was a mirror. Camera 2, now wide again, caught the tableau, Joy with her clenched fist. Sunny staring off-screen. Whoopi adjusting her chair. The paper, unmoving. And Arnold, still not reaching for power, just refusing to yield it. The audience didn't erupt. But something else did. A producer's voice, in the background, broke through a floor speaker, not meant for broadcast. We may need to shift segments. It was quiet. But not quiet enough. Someone heard it. Arnold glanced, just for a second, toward the control booth. Not with defiance. With understanding. You brought me here to be provocative, he said. But what provokes people now isn't what I say. It's what I refuse to avoid. There was no retort. Not anymore. And then, without signal, without script, a studio assistant, barely visible at the edge of frame 6, nodded toward the floor director. Even the crew was listening now. The room didn't shift. It recalibrated. A second passed. Then another. Arnold's hand hovered above the paper he had placed earlier. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. Silence had already taken a side. Then, without changing his posture, he said it. I don't need an apology. His voice was even. Not defiant. Not wounded. Just level. Like a bar set too high to be seen. I just want the people watching at home to believe one thing. He paused. Let the words breathe. That they're still capable of thinking for themselves. He didn't look at the camera. He didn't look at Joy. He didn't even look at the paper. Instead, he rotated the sheet slowly, with 2 fingers, a quarter turn, then let it be. A small move. But deliberate. And more powerful than any soundbite. Then, almost mechanically, he reached forward, thumb and forefinger, and adjusted the microphone by an inch. Click. The exact same gesture from chapter 1. But now, the context had inverted. Back then, it had been a defense mechanism. Now, it was a declaration of control. The audience didn't erupt. They absorbed. No gasps. No applause. Just a tightening of air. A man in the 4th row, arms crossed earlier, now leaned forward ever so slightly. Not to attack. To listen. Across the panel, Whoopi glanced sideways. Not at Arnold, but at the producer's booth. Like she was scanning for the next talking point, and for the first time, didn't find one. Joy, still seated upright, held her expression. But the tension around her jaw betrayed the pressure building underneath. She shuffled a page that didn't need shuffling. Beside her, Sunny tapped her pen once, then stopped mid-air. noticed it, and placed the pen down. Arnold remained still. He had no follow-up, no chase, no need to claim the moment, because the moment had settled on him. That's what unnerved them. Joy finally blinked. So, we're just pretending media manipulation doesn't exist. But the energy was wrong. The crowd knew it. The tone was off. Arnold didn't take the bait. He didn't even respond. He turned slightly toward her, but only enough to acknowledge the sound, not the question. You know, he said, softer now, some of us come here not to debate, but to hold up a mirror. Another silence. Then, just before the tension cracked, he added, it's not always flattering, but it's always fair. Camera 3 pushed in, tight frame, chin to forehead. Behind him, the screen displaying the live feed now showed a split, Arnold on the left, the Views logo on the right. But the balance had broken. His side glowed a little brighter. Whether by accident or design, the light had chosen. A low cough came from the audience. Not disruptive. Human. Real. Like someone remembering they were allowed to exist outside the script. Sunny spoke, but not to Arnold. Some viewers think you're just playing stoic, she said, eyes scanning cue cards. That silence is a performance, too. Arnold nodded. Once. I'm sure they do. Beat. But it's not silence if you're still listening. He looked at her, not harshly, not warmly, just directly. Sunny exhaled through her nose. Closed the folder in front of her. Nothing dramatic. But symbolic. It didn't reopen for the rest of the segment. Joy leaned forward, pushing her glasses up. Let's be clear, Arnold raised a hand. Not palm out. Not aggressive. Just raised. A gesture halfway between courtesy and caution. I came here to talk. Not to spar. If someone else wants the last word, take it. He gestured at the table. Not sarcastically. Sincerely. Joy didn't respond. Not immediately. Then, go on. But it didn't sound like permission. It sounded like retreat. Arnold didn't speak again. Instead, he looked into the camera, not the room camera, not the panel feed, but the red light camera. The direct-to-broadcast. His expression didn't change. Just the angle of his gaze. For the first time since he sat down, he made contact with the unseen audience. And he didn't blink. Somewhere backstage, a light cue blinked early. The technician hesitated, unsure if it was a malfunction or an unscripted signal. But no one called it out. They let it run. Because something real was happening. And no one wanted to interrupt. A few seconds later, as the segment neared its scheduled end, Arnold adjusted his posture. Not to leave. Just to reset. He lifted the water glass. Took a sip. Set it down. Looked at no one. And waited. The moment felt unscripted. But the camera was ready. It always was. Arnold leaned forward, but not to speak. He looked directly into the main camera, the center lens, red tally light on. The one responsible for broadcasting the illusion of control. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The lens is power, he said. And today, it doesn't lead. It reflects. The air in the studio didn't shift. It froze. A second camera cut. Control Room B. Now, for the first time, the audience saw what the tech crew had been watching all along, the live monitor. Arnold's face filled the frame, steady, color-graded, sharp. There was no Chiron. No lower third. Just the raw, unfiltered image of a man saying something too still to be staged. The studio lighting dropped, half a stop. Not all at once, but like a system failing in reverse. The host's table faded into a quiet half-shadow. The wood grain of the set lost its polish. Even the mugs lost their gleam. Only Arnold remained in light. Not because he was performing. Because he wasn't. Joy blinked first. Her pen tapped once on the desk. Then again. She leaned toward the producer's desk off camera, whispering something unheard, but her mic was still hot. Is he allowed to do this? A pause. Static on the feed. Arnold didn't move. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the panel. He looked straight through the lens, like it wasn't a camera, but a person who had been watching too long without asking why. On screen, his reflection didn't blink. In the second row of the audience, a teenage girl stopped scrolling her phone. Next to her, a man in a campaign volunteer shirt slowly folded his arms, not in defiance, but in decision. The kind you make when you realize someone just told the truth, and you didn't expect it to come from there. Back on set, Sunny adjusted her earpiece, but didn't speak. Her gaze had shifted down to her notepad. She wasn't reading. She was drawing tiny circles in the margin, over and over, like someone trying to hold on to the rhythm of control. Whoopi inhaled audibly, as if preparing to cut in. But no words followed. Her mouth opened, paused, then closed again. Instead, she straightened her blazer. A default gesture. Arnold reached to the paper in front of him, the same one from Chapter 4. But he didn't lift it. The studio never cut to commercial. It should have. But no one wanted to be the first to move. Arnold hadn't spoken in 40 seconds. He just sat there, still, composed, his hands folded loosely over the same sheet of paper. No music. No graphics. No voiceover teasing the next segment. Just the man. And the silence he left open, like a door no one had dared walk through in years. Joy tried first. She cleared her throat, not loudly, just enough to signal recovery. Then leaned forward, too far forward, her smile too fast. "Well, Governor Schwarzenegger," she said. "I think we've had." He stood. Quietly. Not abruptly. There was no scrape of chair legs. Just the sound of a man deciding he'd said everything he needed to, and didn't owe the rest to theatrics. Arnold didn't reach for the paper. Didn't point. Didn't thank them for their time. Instead, he did something infinitely more unsettling. He looked, not at the hosts, not at the audience. He looked just past the nearest camera, to the place behind it, to the space where viewers usually forget they're also being seen. A pause. Then he said, very softly, "You don't need applause to mean something. You just need to mean it when no one's clapping." The line didn't land like a quote. It landed like a truth someone forgot to turn into content. In the control room, a producer whispered, "We're losing framing," but no one adjusted the shot. Arnold turned away from the desk. No handshake. No cue for exit music. As he stepped off the set, the floor lights shifted again. It wasn't theatrical. It was technical. When he passed through the halo of the main key light, it dimmed by exactly 20%. A signal to the lighting operator, the subject is no longer on stage. But he didn't disappear. He kept walking. One camera, an older one mounted high on the ceiling rail, followed him from above. No zoom. Just a slow, respectful track. Through the wings. Past a tangle of cables. Past a young production assistant frozen with a clipboard in hand. Out. Not in a rush. Not with a mission. Just done. Back on the stage, the camera returned to the hosts. But they didn't speak. Not immediately. Sunny adjusted her sleeve, visibly, but didn't make eye contact with Joy or Whoopi. Joy picked up her cue card, turned it over, then back again, as if the script had somehow changed while no one was looking. Whoopi exhaled. Loudly this time. Not for drama, but because the oxygen in the room had shifted. Like someone had opened a window, and she wasn't sure if she wanted it shut again. In the third row, the elderly woman from earlier had not sat down. She hadn't clapped. Hadn't spoken. She simply watched the empty doorway Arnold had exited through. Then the aftershock. A sound so small it almost didn't register. The microphone. Still on the table. Still live. Its red light blinked once. Then again. Then it went off. But not because someone turned it off. Because he had left it on purpose. He didn't carry it with him. Didn't drop it. Didn't throw it back in a final mic drop moment. He just let it stay. Still. Upright. Facing the hosts. A presence. A remainder. Whoopi reached out, not toward it, but toward her own mic, and unplugged it. That gesture said more than any wrap-up segment ever could. It said, "I won't speak after that." The screen slowly faded, not to a promo, not to a teaser, but to an image most viewers couldn't shake: a table, half-lit. 3 empty chairs. 1 microphone, still facing forward. The caption underneath, auto-generated, read-only, inaudible, and for once. That was the most honest thing they'd ever aired. He only rested his fingers on the top edge. A visual anchor. Then, he did something no one expected. He pushed his chair back by 2 inches. Not to retreat, but to make space for silence. That silence wasn't empty. It filled the studio. For the first time in the segment, no one scrambled to retake the floor. No one reached for a counterfact. No one even adjusted their posture. Because the floor wasn't theirs anymore. Control room A cut back to the wide shot. Arnold sat alone in the spotlight, the rest of the stage receding. It didn't look like a TV segment anymore. It looked like a hearing. The kind where something moral just cracked through the script. A whisper passed through the audience, not a word, but a soft murmur of breath. As if the viewers in studio had just realized, they weren't watching a guest. They were witnessing an indictment. And not of Arnold. Of the show. Of the format. Of the idea that power only exists when it's framed. Arnold lifted his eyes once more, this time not at the camera, but slightly above it. Where the red tally light sat, blinking, almost embarrassed. "I'm not here to entertain your fear of complexity," he said. "I'm here because someone, somewhere, is tired of being talked over." No one clapped. That would have broken it. Instead, a man in the back row shifted forward. His face was lined, blue collar, the kind that's heard too many slogans. He didn't smile. He nodded. Then the unexpected. The studio camera, C2, the roaming crane, tilted ever so slightly down. A production decision. But it felt like deference. Like the machine itself was recognizing that, for once, it was not the authority. It was the mirror. Arnold glanced at the host's table. Didn't speak. Didn't smirk. Didn't gloat. He only adjusted the microphone. One last time. Exactly the same way he had in Chapter 1. But this time, no one laughed. No one dismissed the gesture. Because now, everyone understood, it wasn't nervousness. It was ritual. A man grounding the space before he speaks truth. The lights didn't return to normal. They didn't need to. Normal had already left the room. The camera held the wide shot. Then, cut to black. Not for commercial. But because some silences deserve to be left unbroken.